The United Nations Security Council has condemned in the strongest terms the terror attack in Jammu and Kashmir's Pahalgam region, underlining the need to hold the perpetrators, organizers and sponsors of the reprehensible act of terrorism accountable and bring them to justice. The 15-nation UNSC issued a press statement which it reaffirmed that terrorism in all its forms and manifestations constituted one of the most serious threats to international peace and security. Parallelly, the US Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, has pledged support to Prime Minister Narendra Modi in hunting down the terrorists involved in the terrorist attack that took place in Pahalgam. Meanwhile, there are 15 other nations including United States, United Kingdom, Israel, Russia, Germany, Iran, UAE, Jordan, France, Singapore and Japan that have condemned the terror attack and expressed their condolences. So let's start this conversation. I have with me Jim Rice, who's an American expert, strategic affairs expert. Jim, thank you for joining us. And of course, the first question about what do you make of President Donald Trump's statement when he comes out and says that he is close to the Pakistani leadership as well as Prime Minister Narendra Modi of India, and this conflict continues for the last 1500 years, which is factually incorrect. But at the same time, he says that this is a border conflict and he's sure both countries can resolve this issue amicably. And then in contrast, there has been a very strong statement that has been put in by the Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, who says that United States stands firmly behind India and is going to give a strong response to the terror activity that is taking place, that took place in India on 22nd of April.
Thanks very much for having me on. First of all, I'd like to express my deep condolences to the families of the victims of this horrible terrorist attack against the people of Kashmir. I mean, it's simply reprehensible, and again, condolences to the families. Apart from that, you're asking me to comment on Trump's statements?
Yes, I am.
Okay, well, as most people are aware, Mr. Trump has little awareness of history, world history, even American history. So I think that we can dismiss a lot of the things that Trump says, and it's almost impossible for me to comment on such things. What was the second thing that you were talking about? His equivocation?
In contrast, Tulsi Gabbard, the US Director of National Intelligence, says that there is going to be full unhinged support of America for India to hunt down the perpetrators. So okay, what is the stand of America here?
It's unclear. As we know from the time of Trump's inauguration, his administration has been characterized by chaos. First of all, his equivocation, his moral equivocation between the two sides is ridiculous. In terms of Tulsi Gabbard, I will reserve my thoughts on Miss Gabbard, but I would agree with her. In this regard, she is correct.
Okay. Ambassador Pradeep Kapoor, also on the telecast with me. Ambassador Kapoor, how do you view the situation? There are condolence messages coming in from all across the globe, and that's exactly how it should be, condemning the terror attack, a reprehensible attack. At the same time, Iran has also come out offering its assistance in intervening in the matter and mediating peace between India and Pakistan. Now, does India really need external interference in the matter that it is very capable of fighting on its own?
Thank you, Megha. Well, I would firstly say that it is very reprehensible what has happened. It is very unfortunate, and my heartfelt condolences to the families of the victims, and prayers for speedy recovery to those who are injured. And my starting point would be that actions have to be taken by India and by the global community to ensure that such an act is not repeated again. Now, if there are other countries who want to mediate, they should be asked to do that in terms of counseling Pakistan to see how it can change its ways, change its path. Because, as I had been saying earlier, also, for a country like Pakistan, which has received so much development aid from 1947, and in 2025, what it has to show for it is absolutely very, very pathetic. So, for a country which is one of the highest recipients of development aid in the world, for the return on investment to be so little, the world has to start asking questions. The IMF has to stop all further loans to Pakistan completely so that they understand that they cannot use this money for wrong purposes, including for aiding and abetting terrorism in different ways, or finding its way to the pockets of the army generals. So sanctions have to be imposed by the authorities in different agencies like the UN. UN has made a strong statement. It's one of the strongest statements coming out which I have observed in the last few decades on an incident like this. It is very commendable, but that is not enough. They have to impose sanctions. They have to blacklist Pakistan. They have to put Pakistan on the terrorism list, state sponsor of terrorism, so that automatically other countries also are able to impose sanctions. Pakistan has to be thrown out of the Commonwealth till it sort of apologizes to the international community and takes action against the terrorists. Similarly, the World Bank, the ADB, all the multilateral agencies have also to halt all the projects in Pakistan till Pakistan stops its support for terrorism and
Okay.
realizes that their future has to lie towards the path of development. Now, about Donald Trump's statement, Mega, I do not want to dispute that in any way because what he says sometimes has a different meaning. He is expressing it in a different way. Yes, India, in Bharat, Hindu Muslim troubles have been going on for 1500 years since the time the Muslims first came into Hindustan, Bharat. There have been genocidal attacks on Hindus for the last 1500 years. So when he says that this problem is 1500 years, it makes a lot of sense to me because he's talking about Hindu Muslim issues and the genocide of Hindus at the hands of the Muslim rulers. So that problem has to be resolved also and has to be acknowledged also and has to be put on the front pages of the mainstream media to understand as to what transpired in these last 1500 years. Now, for, like in Kargil, at some stage, some of the Americans had intervened, and then India had sort of gone back on the offensive and claimed back the territory which Pakistan had dubiously taken over. So, similarly, while we do not need their support in terms of the military aspect for sorting out this issue, but getting their moral support, getting their support in international agencies, getting their support to talk to the Pakistani generals, because Pakistan is not a country, it's an army with a country. So the people who make the decisions there are the army generals. So to talk to the army generals and put some sense into their heads. And if anybody listens to the speech made by Asim Munir, and it is shocking that somebody who's head of the army and is de facto head of the country can make such a statement. So for those people to be sort of talked to, it is very essential for countries like China also. China, India has to talk very firmly to China. China is already in a very precarious state economically because of the internal economic situation, because of the tariff war with US.
Okay.
So for India to say that we will stop our trade with China if you do not take strict steps and make strong statements against Pakistan is another step we have to take.
Okay.
So
Okay.
I'm
All right.
glad.
There has been a message of condolence that has also been offered by the Chinese side. A statement on that regard that has come in. Do we need more? Do we need more strong, more concrete messages, narratives being built by countries across the globe in way of condemning Pakistan for its involvement in the terror attack? Yes, most definitely. Is this going to happen? Remains to be seen. Burzeen Wagmar also on the telecast with me. Burzeen, particularly the aspect, the idea of Iran mediating in the matter. The fact that it is the only country that has come out and said that it could be an intermediary in ensuring the tensions are simmered down. But again, do you think it's acceptable to India, keeping in mind although Iran has close cultural, civilizational as well as diplomatic ties with India, it continues to have its association with Pakistan as well?
To be a mediator, you need to be an honorable arbiter. And to be an honorable arbiter, you ought to be disinterested and dispassionate. Iran clearly falls on every count as such. Look no further than the fact that Pahlavi Iran, royalist Iran pre-79, and even Islamic Republic post-79 had one constant policy of supporting Pakistan on all three wars with India. That is a patent fact, particularly during 1965 and 1971. So the question of Iran being dispassionate clearly flies in the face of reality and is utter nonsense. So even if the Iranians are making noise and power projection, it is simply a waste of everyone's time, including New Delhi's. Point number two, Pakistan and Iran have their own agendas too. When Iran blasted missiles and drone attacks into Pakistan last January into Balochistan province, and then Pakistan reciprocated 2 days later, only tells you that both are beachheads for their own Baloch separatists. And they both have much to hide and much to conceal. So that's a different equation, but I do bring it on board because that needs to be pointed out too. And then there's the question of both having collaborated in the past. In 1973, between 73 and 76, Zulfikar Ali Bhutto and the Shah in quashing the Baloch independence movement in Pakistan's Balochistan province. So both can blow hot, blow cold, and they do when it suits them. It is a transactional relationship. And Iran, for that matter, has always had a transactional relationship with either India or Pakistan in their South Asian perspective of things. The Islamic Republic that is to say. So they blow cold when it suits them,
okay,
and I wouldn't trust anything they have to offer.
Okay. General Rajan Kochar, coming to you and talking about the narrative that has been built and the flip-flop that has happened from the Pakistani establishment side. From seeing Ishaq Dar, who is the foreign minister of Pakistan, calling these terrorists freedom fighters, to then blaming India for orchestrating and plotting a terrorist dastardly attack on its own Hindu population, now the Prime Minister of the country 4 days later comes out and in backtracking over the offensive that has been built on India, says that he is open to an independent, fair, unbiased probe in this matter, which is essentially saying that he would want a third party to intervene in the matter and probe into this massacre that has taken place. Can Pakistan be taken on face value?
To Megha, absolutely not, because Pakistan's track record, if you go back into times, right from General Ziaul Haq's time, when he pronounced the policy of bleeding India through 1,000 cuts. So I don't think we can trust Pakistan. And why they are backtracking? Because there has been a backlash by the Kashmiris, who have stood solidly with the Hindus, who have condemned the attack. They have taken out a candlelit march. They have carried out protests condemning this entire terrorist attack. So I think Pakistan had to recalibrate its strategy on, especially on this strategic communication part of it, and that is why you would have seen that the TRF also, the resistance front, which initially took responsibility for carrying out this attack, later on backtracked and said that we have got nothing to do with this attack. So, and subsequently, the Prime Minister of Pakistan is also making such statements because they are expecting a very strong response from India. The response from India this time, mind you, Mega, is not going to be on the lines of Balakot or a simple surgical strike. We have already started out a diplomatic offensive. Most of the countries, practically the majority of the countries which have a reckoning, have stood by India and have made statements in support of India's stand, and
Okay.
that is why you saw our Prime Minister speaking in a public forum in Bihar in English. He was addressing the international community, so the diplomatic offensive is already on.
Yeah.
Now we are waiting for the economic offensive. We are talking of sanctions, and I think the UN, I do appreciate the UN Security Council statement, but at the same time, they need to name Pakistan because they have still not named Pakistan. They have condemned this terrorist attack. Yes, fine. But I would like them to go a step further to name Pakistan and shame Pakistan. Because you see, unless we do that, what right had they got to remove Pakistan from the FATF grey list when they fully knew that the terrorist camps are still operating in Pakistan?
Okay.
Today,
Yeah.
there is a clinching evidence to suggest that these terrorist camps are there. The infiltration, the way it is taking place, and it's high time Pakistan is put back on the FATF grey list. So that is the economic front I'm talking about. And finally, the military front, I think the Indian Army is preparing its options, and I'm sure in a matter of a few days, Pakistan will come to know, and they will not know what has hit them. So I think these statements which are emanating from Pakistan have actually toned down now because they understand the kind of response the India is going to give to them. And I think it is high time General Munir is given a sermon by someone, I don't know, who will be able to tell him that he is leading the destruction of Pakistan for his
Okay.
own personal agenda.
Okay,
Because he's a Maulvi.
Adit Kothari, coming to you and taking forward that conversation from General Kocha, what are the next steps? You know, the first step is to halt the Indus Water Treaty, downgrade the diplomatic ties, remove the diplomats, Pakistani diplomats and attaches, and return them home, revoke all the visas, the 17 different types of visas where Pakistani nationals have been allowed to enter into Indian territory. There is a lot of commotion talking about how the line of control is being monitored and surveilled very sensitively by the Indian Armed Forces. There are other developments which I would not like to share because those are sensitive in nature. But what is the next step in reaction to what Pakistan is warning India of suspending the Simla agreement?
So, Megha, with regards to the Shimla agreement, I don't think there was anything to be suspended. If you look at all of the clauses of the Shimla agreement, they have long been suspended from the Pakistani side. They've never lived up to any of the promises made in 1972. It was meant to be a bilateral agreement, and it was a bilateral issue to be tackled by India and Pakistan. They have constantly, year on year, internationalized it, raised it in the UN, trying to get UN's attention to try and sort of intervene. So, they have no foot to stand on, and which is why they're playing this sort of dirty politics. Just wanted to take your argument further. What should be the next steps from India's perspective? I think one of the first things that we need to understand is shame in private is no shame at all. Whatever we do, it needs to be incisive, and it needs to demonstrate to the world that we have a spine, and it needs to demonstrate to Pakistan that, we will not take it lying down again and again. This has gone on for far too long, for 78 years. We've dealt with them, we've endured them, and despite everything, we've still gone ahead with Aman ki Ashas and Aman ki Tamashas as well. So all of that political correctness needs to be kicked into the dustbin, and Pakistan needs to be dealt with a firm hand. Indus Water Treaty is definitely one of those tools which India needs to exercise, because for way too long, for 64 years, we've traded water for peace, and it has yielded absolutely no result for us.
Okay.
We've given the lion's share of the water, which is 80% of the water, and that and we've never got peace in return for that. But that is a long-term sort of a plan. We're looking at 1.5 to 2 years sort of a timeline for that. From a short-term perspective, I think we need to ensure that we need to create international pressure on Pakistan. We need to get them to be called a pariah state, and countries that we deal with, we need to mount pressure on them to ensure that they do not deal with Pakistan. We need to completely stop from any sort of international.
Jim, I'm coming to you, and I do want to understand, while the countries, heads of states have very clearly and vehemently condemned this terrorist attack, why do certain media organizations and agencies continue to call it in their headlines to be an attack by gunmen or militants? I mean, they're just shying away from calling it an attack by some freedom fighters. So, and this was also, very clearly put out by the US government as well, where there was this very, they put out a tweet and said, crossed the militants word from the headline of New York Times and put it as terrorists, and saying that New York Times is lives in its own world and is far away from the reality, whether it is the Israeli terror attack or the Pahalgam terror attack in Kashmir. So how do you explain this, completely cut off from reality? Or I don't know, this is a narrative that has been built again and again for decades together when it comes to the Western media looking at India, looking at Asia, or even the Middle East.
Well, those are very good questions that you're asking, and the answer is, not simple. I think that in this very, horrible terrorist attack, which was perpetrated by, obviously, a band of evil men who were backed presumably by Lashkar-e-Taiba, or a terrorist organization in Pakistan, whether it was backed by the ISI or whether it was not, it's unclear to me. But in terms of the narrative, I think that sadly the media tends to equivocate and fails to offer moral clarity.
And how do you justify when the same Western media in fact terms a country like Russia as a terrorist nation?
Well, I think in the case of the Russia invasion of Ukraine, in the same way that there is moral clarity in the terrorist attack on the people of Kashmir, there's also moral clarity in Putin's bloody and ruthless attack on the people of Ukraine.
But that's what I'm saying. The ruthlessness shown by Putin, how is it any different from the ruthlessness that was shown by the terrorists on Hindus? They were stripped naked just to see what religion they were from, and then shot at point blank, and then told their wives and sisters and other women folk in their family to go narrate their ordeal to Prime Minister Modi. I mean, that's as brutal as it could be. Anyway.
Absolutely right. You're absolutely correct. I can't agree with you more. In both of these situations, there's obviously an aggressor and a victim, and the media and international heads of state should not lose sight of this.
Right, absolutely. I'm out of time. I thank all of you for joining me on the telecast, sharing your views. On that note, I slip into a short break. Thanks for watching NewsX.